order the Tuesday, April 3rd, 2018 Board of Commission meeting for the Port of Bellingham. And we're going to open the meeting with a roll call, and I will ask Commissioner Briscoe.
Here.
Shepherd.
Here.
And Bell, all present. Public comment period. We're going to ask everybody except Mr. Burkholz to stay within the 3-minute time period. We allocate about 15 minutes for public comment. You're free to talk. I've only got 2 people signed up. If anybody else wants to, we can do that at the end. And Mr. Burkholz, we'll start with you.
Thank you. Is this working?
It is.
Yeah, okay.
And I'll let you know.
I'll ask indulgence. I'm well into my 2nd century, so please cut me a little slack. At any rate, this goes back actually more than 3 decades. It's the problem of the naming of the park area as Post Point. That is an utterly false and bogus thing to apply to that area. Post Point is that small rocky outcrop about a half mile south of the park area. That's Post Point, and its name well earned. It won't go into that history, but it's interesting. But at any rate, I consider the Post Point problem as a real fiasco. I could even make the statement that it's been a scam that has been fostered by the port for 35, 40 years, however far back that goes. But how far back is really not a factor. It's what happens and has happened by succeeding commissioners over the, as I say, several decades, at least 3 of which the commissioners were well informed about the facts of the case. And I had been before the commissioners. This is my 5th time. Last time was here with Brian Griffin. And I have gotten only 1 set of minutes from the board, from the commissioners, and that one has a comment that implies, and I will admit, anytime I see or hear the name Post Point, my paranoia is jacked up high. And but at any rate, this, as I say, I've been before the commissioners at least now 5 times, and so that there can be no claim that that the commissioners have not been aware of what the truth is here. There's no justification for the name Post Point to be, as it was, plastered on the park area, and that park area is the residual of Post Point. That's what that park is, and there's no way around that. That will never go away. But the port had plastered the Post Point name on it, and as I say, fostered it for decades. My first approach to this got nowhere with the commission, and the port had put a sign down at the entry to the park. It was an eye-catching sign, 7 or 8 feet long, 2.5, 3 feet high, with large lettered Post Point. In other words, visitor, you are coming to the park area that is Post Point. A picture of that with me went down to the State Board of Names. And shortly thereafter, the port was admonished to cease and desist on trying to name a chunk of the state. It's illegal to name anything without going through the Board of Names. So the port did take that sign out. However, there was no effort to change the name of the park. And the sign was gone for a bit, was then put back, and it had Post Point, and then parenthetically, in much smaller figures, parenthetically, Pose Point. That did not last too long. But at any rate, plastering the name of Post Point in that park area is a totally false, bogus affair. But there was no listening to the comments that had been put in over several decades. I understand now the port has, in a sense, let the Post Point name slip away, and they are busy with another name game, putting the name of Marine Park to the area. What they've done is to capitalize the couple of words that identify the coastline or the that the park has as one of its things. And I think that is really unforgivable, to put that kind of name on property they know that has historical significance for the people in the area. The Post Point story goes back, and it's a long one. Granted, it's not Gettysburg or Pearl Harbor, but it is an important history for the people of this community. And I am very much upset about having it not even recognized, not one word about that park being the residual base of Post Point. And oh boy. But at any rate, I had a talk with Sylvia considerable length, and on the first, I might say why I'm back here. Brian Griffin, who produced that History of Fairhaven, which is an excellent work. At my 100th birthday party, he stopped by and greeted, and he said, by the way, I've mentioned Poe and Poe's Point in the book. And a day or so later, I got to thinking, cripes, I'll try one more time. And that's why I'm here. And I feel like I'm a voice in the wilderness, that's for sure. But I think it has to be faced. I can say that this has been a scam produced over decades, because there's nothing, there's no reason whatever that the Post Point label has been put there. Post Point is a small rocky prominence, half a mile down south of the park. And that's where the name should stay. No. Should I gab on any longer?
I have a question for you.
I would like to, if there are any mitigations that can be produced with this, I would like to hear them now.
And I have a quick question for you. I have a question for you.
Yes.
There are two names, Dead Man's Point and Graveyard's Point. It seems like the site is,
Okay, yeah, I got that from the office when I called, and I was told that Poe was just one of a bunch of names. Yes, in the way back when, Alonzo Poe's properties went to his brother Americo, and Americo sold a bit of Poe's Point to Dan Harris. Dan Harris then sold that bit to the county at a considerable profit, and a graveyard, cemetery was put there. And actually, and it's one of those things. People say there's a cemetery there, and they refer to it was a very brief-lasting, functional name for the area. Another one was Dead Man. There were a couple of somewhat careless coal miners whose heads were taken by Haida raiders. But those are just very offhand. And how can you even bring this up when these names were used for a very brief time, and compared to the 75 years or so that Poe's Point was a significant object for the people in this community. And actually, what happened to Poe's Point, it was sort of a blend of things. Things were really down. Fairhaven, as Brian has said, was a boom and bust thing. It was a boom when the miners were heading for the Fraser, and then it was a bust when actually the trade goods that was available here at Bellingham Bay was lumber and coal. The coal was not of very good quality, but those were the trade goods that went out of here. But along came fisheries. And this was a real boon to the area because the port was filling up with fishing boats. Canneries were there. One cannery formed that boulder that you look at from the walk down there, the Taylor Avenue walk. But at any rate, there was need for a commercial area. And the people of the times looked, and actually an engineer would look up at that 80 or 90 feet of glacial till and said, my God, I've got a vertical gravel quarry sitting right here on site. And so Poe's Point was sacrificed to the, what do you call it, economic exigency of the times. The fisheries were blooming. The Poe's Point was sacrificed. We had the commercial area, and the first beneficiary was PAF, the fish, and now it has a lot of occupants down there. But I think there should, I am asking that there be real serious consideration of the value of that base of Old Pose Point and what its history ought to mean to the people of this area. And I did make a suggestion, got it thrown right back when I suggested a name and comes back on the phone. Poe was only one of a bunch of names. Please. At any rate, I made a suggestion, and I think that that park has to be named, and a name that has historical significance. Marine Park sure as hell doesn't have any historical significance. And I think that park, that park is a real treasure for the people. It's relatively small, but it's a real treasure for the people. But it has to have a name that means something. And it has to be put there so that people pay attention to it. It can't be just a little bitty sign, or like when this was, the port would say, well, we got the Pose Point name back. Actually, there was a little affair down there that was supposed to be a ribbon cutting thing and so on. It wasn't, but it was actually what was put up there on the shelter was a timeline. There was mention of Alonzo Poe and Pose Point in this timeline. There was a picture that was put there. This picture was taken from the shelter down to that sort of viewpoint down there, and that had on it, in very small print, Pose Point, and it looked like it was right, and you are here. Arrow, the broken arrow, you are here. And that was taken out, and the next picture that was hung up there was really a good picture. This real handsome forest-covered point thrusting out into the bay. There wasn't a lick of indication of what that point was. There was no name. Again, arrow, you are here. Then the next time I saw it down there, that picture was gone. That is a picture that ought to be there, properly identified as Pose Point. But I come back and there's a picture there that me with my medical background had all the charm of a cadaver on an autopsy table. It was a picture of Pose Point being torn apart. And that, I don't know what sort of games are being played with that, but that park area deserves respect. And it has the need of being named, properly named, in a way that the visitors down there will see it and acknowledge it. And I would say, here I go. But at any rate, I did leave a bit of a very court sketch with Sylvia that I think there ought to be a small plaza, the name on top. And my suggestion for a name is Pose Point Memorial Park. That doesn't conflict in any way with Board of Names, not trying to name a chunk of the port there. It just memorializes Pose Point. which was a very significant piece for the people here for decades. And it's gone, and ought not to be gone.
So we will take this up at some point. I said we will take this up at some point. I'm sure we'll discuss this with Sylvia before she retires.
He said they'll discuss it and then we'll get back to you.
Pardon?
We're going to discuss it internally and then we'll get back with you.
Yeah, oh, okay. Hearing aids only add to confusion.
I agree with you on
So,
that.
But I
so
think,
thank you for your passion on this.
I thank you for the time, and hopefully some real thoughtful consideration.
I'd just like to add that you did refer to games being played. As long as I've been a commissioner here, which is I'm in my third year, we have not tried to play any games with naming that or had any backdoor deals about not just, listening to what you've said. And I do believe we've added signage down there trying to get to where you wanted to be. So rest assured, we're not playing games with the names down at Post Point. There's no hidden agendas, okay?
Yeah. Well, say that, to me, that is just unacceptable to just put a generic marine park name on a place that has history. And that history is important for the people. Yeah. Here.
Thank you.
And thank you much for your time.
Thank you.
Sorry I haven't been too boring.
Thank you, Doctor.
Away you go. Oh, hey, oh, here, hold it, lean back. I don't want you in my lap. Okay? Thank you much, guys. Hey, thanks for your patience. Yeah. Okay.
Have anybody else?
And I just hope I have that much spunk when I'm 70, let alone 100. All right, next on the list is Jim Kyle.
Thank you, Commissioners. Jim Kyle, Vice President of the Working Waterfront Coalition. Just quickly, I saw a lot of activity on Whatcom Waterway on the way to the meeting, so I stopped and talked to Mark Lake. He was really busy, but he asked me to deliver a message. He would like to see the commissioners come down and get a good look at what's happening. They have 4 barges at the barge terminal, C Street Barge Terminal. A huge one is being loaded now to go to Alaska. There are 2 other barges to be loaded. There's a gold barge, a 4th barge, which is really interesting. I'm not sure what they're doing with that, but it's a really busy place, and Mark would like to have an opportunity to explain what's happening to you there and explain also what is necessary to keep that activity going in the future. But there's way more happening there now than I've seen for years, so it's really encouraging, and it's great to have some returns on the investments that the port has made there. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. We'll get down there.
All of us. We'll all get down there, Jim. Just not together.
Well, we can go together, we just can't talk about it.
Anyone else have anything else to say to the commission? All right, I will close the public comment period and move on to the consent agenda.
A motion to approve consent agenda items A through G.
I have a question about D, and I know Adam's not here, so maybe Brian can answer it for me. Do you know what they're going to try and do there? It wasn't explained in the. If not, I can wait till Adam, because I was.
John or Greg, if you have information on item D as well, feel free to bring it forward.
There's a packet at the podium as well.
D is the Blaine Harbor breakwater corrosion mitigation.
I believe the commissioner was addressing consent agenda item D, which regards the Blaine Harbor breakwater. Is that correct?
Correct, yeah.
At this point, the recommendation from the preliminary investigation was to repair the zinc coating that's in the splash zone. But again, this item is just to hire the consultant to do that full investigation and provide a recommendation, which the commission would be apprised of.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know, no other questions.
I'm interested in a little bit more background on item B about the concession fee at the airport. I'm wondering if this is going to be a permanent fee, or is this have a sunset to it? Also kind of wondering how much money we expect to generate and who is going to be in charge of constructing that QTA.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Marie Duckworth, Landside Supervisor at Bellingham International Airport. So the QTA and the customer facility charge, CFC, is a common way to fund landside operations and landside capital projects at airports. The CFC is something that we negotiated with the rental car companies. It would be $3.50 per transaction day for the folks who are using the rental cars at the airport. And that money would be used to design, build, and construct a new rental car facility. And it would also be used to maintain that facility once it has been built. And it will also be used to deconstruct the current wash rack. I do have a short presentation that I can provide for you if you'd like.
Sure, that would be just fine. So it would be a permanent fee then that we wouldn't intend to expire.
It would be a permanent fee potentially, but we would be happy to reassess depending on all factors involved.
Commissioner Sunil Harman, good afternoon. Typically, a CFC is negotiated for the amortization period and recovery. So in this instance, we have a 20-year amortization period for roughly a $2.2 million facility with a finance charge of about 4% over the course of so it'll be there for at least 20 years and then possibly have some continuance to maintain and operate the facility, but it won't be at the same rate.
And who builds that facility?
The facility will be constructed by the port.
Okay.
After we've completed this agreement, the next step is to enter into an RFQ for design services and construction.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no, I have no.
That's it.
I have none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passed. On the action item.
A motion to approve a commercial lease between the Port of Bellingham and Lakeside Marine Incorporated for premises at 801 Harris Avenue, Fairhaven Marine Industrial Park, FMIP, Building Number 1.
Thank you, Diane. Good evening, Commissioners. For the record, my name is Brady Scott, a real estate representative here with the Port of Bellingham. First, I'd like to introduce Dan Given, owner of Lakeside Marine, who's here in the audience. Thank you. Lakeside Marine Incorporated is a local company specializing in the construction and repair of dock facilities at lakefront properties. And they also provide storage services for predominantly lake-going vessels. Lakeside Marine recently leased approximately 8,400 square feet from the port at the Bellingham Cruise Terminal, Warehouse 4, for boat storage. They are seeking larger premises and wish to lease the warehouse recently vacated by LFS at the Fairhaven Marine Industrial Park in order to consolidate multiple boat storage facilities and to also fabricate their floats and docks. So the lease before you today is for a 2-year term. It terminates the existing lease with Lakeside Marine, provides a 3-month no base rent period to allow them to refurbish the premises, do some maintenance and repair items on the building, including patching exterior and interior walls, performing some siding repairs, rejuvenate the office space, and other items to accommodate the tenant's use. This lease includes an option for the port to relocate Lakeside Marine to other premises at FMIP, which gives the port flexibility to enter into a long-term lease at that facility as needed in the 2-year period. Port staff just completed a walkthrough with LFS yesterday, and we're pleased to be able to enter into a new lease so soon after LFS vacating. And with that, port staff recommends approval of the lease.
I have a question. You go ahead. Do we do any saltwater activity?
No.
Water?
We're open to the idea of having saltwater boats, just on storage on trailers only.
Sorry, if we can get a microphone, so you'll be on the record, please. Thank you.
We're just going to mainly do boats that are on trailers, so they're completely portable. So we're trying to consolidate 4 different warehouses into one large warehouse down there at Building 1. So we're open to the idea of having saltwater boats since the boat ramp's so close. So that is a possibility, but we'd have to figure out the logistics and stuff because we don't normally let customers into the warehouse.
Okay.
So that's,
It'd be great if we could get some saltwater activity out of that too.
yeah, we could do that. I mean, I'm open to
If
it.
it works for you.
It's just got to pay rent, that's all, right?
Yep.
Yeah, that's the idea.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And I was just curious what your range is for your business. How far out of, do you operate outside of Whatcom County and how far?
Yes, we do. I pick up boats as far as the Lake Washington, Lake Sammamish area, and we do a full service care. So, you know, we basically would pick up their boat on the boat lift, bring it back, put it on the trailer, and then service the boat and then store it for the winter and then bring it back in the spring.
And how about for your dock facilities?
Dock facilities we'll utilize on just mainly building floating docks. They're prefabricated, so they come to us in a truck, and then we kind of put it all together. And then we can do saltwater work, but most of our stuff is for Lake Whatcom and Lake Sammamish.
I have no questions.
I have no further questions.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
So we can move to,
We have to vote.
that's where I was headed. You vote?
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, unanimous.
Go in there
Congratulations.
for a minute.
Welcome. You'll love it here.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Tell about the rats, didn't
You did. All right, action item number 2.
A motion to authorize the executive director to purchase truck scales for the Bellingham Shipping Terminal according to Resolution Number 1369, Bellingham Shipping Terminal Equipment Purchases in the amount of $96,710.39, plus a 10% contingency for a total authorized purchase amount of $106,381.42.
Thank you, Diane. Good evening, Commissioners. Chris Clark, Business Development Manager for the shipping terminal. At the end of September, when we had a pressing need for a truck scale to weigh the outbound organic meal, Unitech Company went out of their way to help us secure this equipment. The Sidewinder scales that we've been renting from Unitech have served us well, and we are now able to offer use of them to our other shipping terminal and log pond tenants and charge them a fee for this service. We believe that purchasing the scales rather than continuing to pay the monthly rental would be prudent use of the equipment acquisition funds in the 2018 budget, and ask commissioners to kindly consider this course of action. The scales have become an integral part of the shipping terminal and an important complement to the other equipment now being delivered. Please note we are honored to have Sam Friesian, the president of Unitech, with us today. And Unitech has a long history of fabricating their scales in Bellingham, most recently contracting with A1 Welding in the Iron Gate industrial area. We are pleased to be able to work with Sam, Matt, and the other folks from this outstanding company. And this is Sam here.
Hi, Sam. Thank you for inviting me.
Any questions from the commission?
No, I'm glad to hear we're building stuff locally, using our scale company here. And I don't know how we operate a shipping terminal without a truck scale, to be honest with you, or a port without a truck scale, to be honest with you. I mean, it's like, we just go somewhere else and win when all the stuff's right here. We need to do it. I think it's a good move. I think we should have done it long ago.
Under the current arrangement, what do you anticipate to get for fees?
Well, we've been averaging now about $300 a month. We're charging a competitive rate. It's $6.75 per pass. And actually, most of the fees are paid by Nolan and Grand Camp. And with Nolan's increase in trucks, we expect those fees, we expect them to be making a greater contribution over time to
So you
the
get
use of that scale.
You get a fee for the gross and the tear?
No, Dave, that's
Yeah.
correct, yes.
So you get $12 a pass, basically.
I got another question. So can we set this up so that it can be used by other folks? I mean, we've got truck scales, we got one up here at the Exxon they're using. I mean, can we position this so that trucks can swing down, use it, and so, I mean, we can kind of advertise so we can get more fees
Oh,
out of it?
of course, yeah, there's no reason not to.
So when we position it, we have to position it somewhere where we can swing into our, seems like we might have to go to this zone thing over there, we want to put it somewhere. But I see them backed up everywhere, the scale's trying to do things, so.
Yeah. Well, the thing about this scale is it's actually two 70-foot long scales, so it covers 140 feet. And so we can, well, Sam, you're the expert on this, but I think we could probably accommodate just about any kind of truck on the road today, right?
Yeah, there wouldn't be any trucks that would be longer than that, and in fact, they would be a little bit shorter because of the legal lengths in Washington. Most of the trucks out there will be able to fit on a 100-foot scale, 110 for sure. So you've got plenty of length, which is nice to have a little bit extra length.
Thank you, Sam.
Which begs the question, is it going to be manned?
Well, it's actually, the way it's set up now is that the driver can use the recording equipment and print out his own ticket. So it doesn't need to be manned. Now, under the current situation, when the organic grain comes out of there, it is manned by a clerk from the union for that cargo, because that's cargo that's been received at the shipping terminal. But as far as the other cargoes that are coming in, the logs and that sort of thing, there's no need for manning for those, so the driver can just print a ticket himself.
My only question was, what's the age of the current scale, and how many years of life do we expect out of it?
Well, those scales, they're about, I think, 7 or 8 years old, if that.
Yeah. The length of use would really depend on the traffic, but at the current use rate, you could probably get, I don't know, 20 years out of it, I guess. If you increase it, the volume to 1,000 or 1,500 loads a day, then of course it would go down. But it should last a good long time. And, like Chris said, we'd be happy to manufacture a few more scales for you when the volume gets so heavy that, I was just thinking, and in the Port of Seattle at one of the terminals, Stevedore Oregon Services of America, Terminal 18 and Terminal 30, we have a total of 30 truck scales. Now, we only have one here, so you don't want to be outdone by the Port of Seattle. So maybe in a few years, we'll have 30 truck scales up here, huh, Chris?
Sounds a bit like an arms race.
I would hope so.
Have to find some dirt to
Next
put
thing
them
you know,
on.
we're going to build a wall. So certified, obviously, certified weights, and I guess there's a ton of traffic. We're going to market this at some level, because I know we operated scales up in Ferndale, and we had people coming in from Bellingham going across for the certified weights before they hit the highway. So I would imagine you're going to get a pretty good customer base out of that.
Yeah, there's that opportunity.
And
I might add that we provide service. We do a lot of service work in Whatcom County and are up here frequently. And so we could set up a regular maintenance program for you
I'm not sure if that was included in the bid or not, Chris, I can't remember. But anyway,
was for the
we
equipment.
provide that service.
Okay. I have no more questions. Commissioners? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous?
Thank you, Commissioners. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Sam.
A motion to authorize the executive director to execute a professional services agreement with the Transpo Group in the amount of $33,500 plus a 10% contingency for a total authorized contract amount of $36,850.
Good evening, Commissioners. Greg Nickel, project engineer. This project that we're doing the PSA for is actually part of an ongoing project that's being completed by both the port and the city of Bellingham to improve safety at all the railroad crossings, as well as to create a silent area through the city. That would mean that the trains coming through wouldn't have to blow their horns at all of the crossings. So once all of that is installed throughout the city, they could eliminate those horns that blow quite frequently. The port has three crossings, all of which are in the Fairhaven area. One being a small crossing at the Seaview leasehold in FMIP. The second one being at the entrance to both the ferry vehicle parking area as well as the boat launch. And the third one is along Harris Avenue at the entrance to the Bellingham Cruise Terminal building. The PSA that we're currently talking about will strictly address the boat launch crossing. We went out for RFPS for this, and Transpo Group has been recommended by the staff. They are a transportation engineering firm from Kirkland with an extensive transportation experience as well as working with railroad crossings. The scope of work would be to develop design alternatives, prepare the bid documents, and complete all the permitting associated with it. The scheduled for the project would complete design and permitting in the second and third quarters of this year, with construction starting late this year, possibly early next year. This particular crossing has a number of challenges, primarily because you'll see that there are a number of roads entering and exiting the main thoroughfare through this area that make creating a silent crossing somewhat challenging, and those are some concerns that we're going to identify and address during design. Based on the preliminary evaluation of the site, we've identified two primary likely alternatives, and it may be a combination of these two alternatives. The first one being a non-mountable curb, the second being a quad gate, so you'd have two gates on each side.
That was an expensive one, wasn't it?
So the first alternative would be the non-mountable curb, which is a 100-foot long, about 8-inch tall, 10-inch wide concrete curb. This particular curb is one that I ran into on a bike ride down in Skagit County.
Literally?
Not literally. I didn't run into it. I did have to stop and take a picture of it because I knew I was presenting this. So with that alternative, you can see that the north side of the crossing is quite congested with the entrance into the vehicle staging area for the cruise terminal, the entrance to the boat launch, and then the road that goes out in front of the Coast Guard facility. As a result, it doesn't appear, based on preliminary evaluation, that the non-mountable curb would be feasible. The non-mountable curb on the south side would technically be feasible, but there are a number of challenges that would need to be addressed. Those include the access into the Greyhound bus parking, which they presently come in and turn left in, and obviously if you put a 100-foot long curb, that would have to change, and so there'd be consideration that could potentially reverse that traffic to come out the other direction. In addition, that there's some concerns with access into the boat launch parking, as well as trying to get a trailered boat into and out of the boat launch. So there are a number of concerns that would have to be addressed if we went down that road. The second alternative would be the four-arm crossing. There's presently 2 arms, one on each side, that blocks the oncoming traffic. And this alternative would add an arm on each side to create a fully sealed crossing that would allow us to not have to blow the horns through that area. Both of these alternatives, as well as some additional alternatives, will be evaluated by the selected firm, and then we will go into design and construction. Any questions?
Who issues the permits on this?
So one thing we'll have to address is working with BNSF to coordinate all of that effort. Quite honestly, I'm not certain that there's a huge number of additional permits. It's primarily going to be coordinating with BNSF.
So Commissioner, BNSF can't say no to some of these pre-approved designs. The Federal Railway Safety Administration is the one that says this is an acceptable solution and this is not. So, BNSF doesn't have the same interest we do, but they don't have veto power here.
So is this going to come back before us, before the final decision is made, or is this?
You'll get the shot at approving the final design and the contract to implement that.
Okay.
And what's the time frame?
So construction is currently tentatively scheduled for the end of this year.
Within the next 4 or 5 months, I imagine we'll be coming back to you.
More than likely.
And we have to get, to apply for the quiet zone, we would have to complete all 3 of those
So
prior?
to complete the quiet zone throughout the city?
Just for Fairhaven.
Right. So if you were just to do for Fairhaven, I think that there's a permit process in place, is that correct? That includes the entire city of Bellingham, and so if you wanted to just do Fairhaven, you would need to modify that permit application to just do Fairhaven, and then to answer your question, yes, we would have to do all 3 of those areas.
And the city would need to do Boulevard too, is my understanding.
So it's all or nothing. We either do them all.
Correct.
We would not apply for that quiet zone until all of the ones, both at the city and the port, were completed.
I can answer that. Sylvia, good one. The city of Bellingham filed a notice of intent for all of the Fairhaven and Bellingham areas at once to do one quiet zone. But we could, or they could, move Fairhaven ahead of the others if they aren't. The city got a grant for F Street also. They've been working on Boulevard. We got a grant for Harris. So it may be that they will be all done together. And the city filed the original notice of intent. We may have to modify it either by the port filing a new one or the city modifying it, because originally they were all going to be quad gates. If we do some of these medians, we might have to modify that. But we will work with the city. Well, we won't. Brian and Adam and Greg will work with the city to get that modified.
And at least for the Harris one, I recall we're not doing the quad gate. We're going to be able to put in that median.
That's correct. Yes, sir. And for the Seaview Marine crossing, the one where we take the boats across, it's nothing more than a couple signals that just tell them there's a train coming. So the one that'll be the hardest is this, just because all the ins and outs with the boat launch and with the ferry traffic, it becomes the most problematic.
Are there any grant resources available to help with the costs on this one?
Well, we received a grant for Harris. We'll keep looking for this one, but the fact we just got one for Harris was great. We didn't apply for anything for this one.
So if I'm following correct here, we can add 2 more existing signals as one of the options, like that are there already?
It would be 2 additional gates.
Right.
That would look identical to the ones that are there.
And the reason that's a more expensive solution is the sensor system that has to be built in if a car gets caught in the middle. All 4 gates come down, a car's in the middle, there has to be something that senses that and opens the gate so the car can get out.
Isn't that called a gas pedal?
Well, good.
And The reason Sylvia said we won't work on it,
Yeah.
Sylvia's retiring.
But we're going to call her up at our first meeting. We discussed this and ask her how the fishing is. So.
You can drop in from the cloud like I do.
You won't.
And I'd just like to acknowledge the extensive public comment we've received at multiple meetings over several years from residents advocating for these safety upgrades.
I have nothing further.
I have nothing further.
Yeah.
A motion to authorize the executive director to execute a professional services agreement with the Transpo Group in the amount of $33,500, plus a 10% contingency for a total authorized contract amount of $36,850.
All in favor?
Aye.
Approved. Thank you. Our last action item?
A motion to authorize the executive director to execute a sole source justification and a contract with Airside Solutions Incorporated of Auburn, Washington for the airfield lighting control and monitoring system in the amount of $56,274.37.
And good evening, Commissioners. Emily Philippi, the Airside Operations Supervisor. In front of you today for consideration is the sole source justification and contract with Airside Solutions to upgrade our airfield lighting and control monitoring system. And as the name suggests, it does control all of our airfield lighting at the airport. So that includes our taxiway lights, our runway lights, all of our signs that are on the airfield, as well as a few navigational items such as our windsocks and then also the beacon on top of the air traffic control tower. And just a little bit of background, the current system was installed in 2010 when we redid our airfield reconstruction. And through the bid process, it was ADB SafeGate. Their products are currently at our airport, and they're actually in 2 locations. So we have the airfield lighting control vault, which is actually just kitty corner from our aircraft rescue and firefighting station on the south end of the field. And then also within the air traffic control tower, there's also a monitor in there that controls the system. And this is just a general application from ADB of kind of how the system works. So the picture that you see on the bottom is what is in our lighting vault. So the square boxes that you see are the regulators, that their software that are configured with all of our signs and lights that are out on the airfield that communicate to the main computer in that vault. And through a communication network, which in our case is a fiber line that runs to the air traffic control tower, that they can also control all of the lighting specifically from the cab of the tower. The remote monitoring system that you do see up here, that is a capability that we are able to add, but that is not something that we currently have at our airport. And so what that looks like specifically at BLI is the airfield lighting control vault, and then you also see on the right-hand side of what that looks like in the air traffic control tower. And it's a very intuitive system. It's literally touch screens where the air traffic control individuals touch the screen of the lights on, the lights off, and then there's some presets in there as well as depending on the weather that day, if there's low visibilities, they can just, with one click of a button, get the airfield lights up to the proper luminosity of where they're supposed to be. And so where we are today, the manufacturer recommends replacement every 5 years. So with the installation in 2010, we're currently at 8 years with the system. And it is vital that we do complete this upgrade just to ensure the reliability of the system, that it's without those lights operating in low visibility conditions as well as night operations, those aircraft would not be able to operate at the Bellingham Airport. And the upgrade does include all of the hardware and software in both of those locations, both in the vault and the traffic control tower. The UPSs, so all the backup power for those systems, and then as well as some spare parts, which we've communicated with maintenance as well as IT of kind of what we've replaced in the past 8 years to just get those on hand so we don't have any downtime to get those products shipped to us during that time. So that is all included in front of you today. And the sole source nature behind this, so we have the FAA, there's the L890 specifications, and the ELT listing, which is the Edison Testing Laboratories. So the FAA is very specific in their regulations, that there's an advisory circular that is 87 pages long that is very specific to the manufacturers of what they have to do to get their product authorized. And the ELT listing is their third-party company that once a manufacturer gets their product to where they think they can meet those FAA specifications, it is then the ELT listing that certifies that, yes, you have met those specifications. And if anyone else was to work on any of those systems besides the original manufacturer, it voids both of those. So in that sense, if we had a different company come and work on our ADB gate software, that would completely void the system and make it useless to us. And there's also proprietary software that's involved and also the configuration. So while it is possible to have a new vendor come in, off the top of my head, I am aware of 4 companies that make these systems, if we replaced everything from square one, that they would be able to do so, but that would be at a price tag of a minimum of $95,000. And what we're proposing today is at $60,000. So that would be a cost savings of $35,000. And we also did our due diligence. I tried to reach out to all the companies. I got replies back from 2, so specifically the Airport Lighting Company as well as Astronics, and they have both confirmed with me that they are not able to perform an upgrade to our system. They would only be able to replace everything. Again, that would come with an additional price tag. So the recommendation is to approve what's in front of you today. With Airside Solutions, they are the sole source distributor for ADB SafeGate products in Washington State. And again, that would come with a cost savings of $35,000 and just under $60,000, which is currently in our budget to do so. And that concludes my presentation. If you have any questions.
I do have a question.
Yes.
Thinking into the future, which kind of what I try to do sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a benefit to replacing the existing stuff we have there? Do we foresee in the future things, any great difference in the lighting or the systems or anything being superior to the one that is there now, even with the upgrades? Do we see anything like that?
Not that I foresee. We've actually been very happy with ADB and Airside Solutions. That we have, our electricians within the port, and Airside Solutions has been very supportive. If anything is outside kind of the scope of the electricians, that they're one phone call away and are available 24 hours a day, that they've been a very reliable company. As well as if we have any signs or anything that go out, they've been very quick on turnaround time. So we've been very happy with that vendor.
Okay, but into the future, you don't see the systems changing too much other than what we have?
No, like the other systems that I've been talking to, it seems like it's the FAA specification, so it's very specific. So there wouldn't be too much difference in those systems.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have a follow-up on Commissioner Briscoe's question. Do any of the other products allow less dependency on a sole source contract in the future? So, any of these other vendors, do they provide something that is operable and ability to be maintained by multiple different vendors, or are they all kind of lock you into this sole source?
Unfortunately, just because of, I guess, the unique nature behind the product, as well as the FAA specifications, that all of those listings would be voided if we went with any other vendor. So it would be across the board.
And importantly, did we get a new logo?
Yes, we did. The airport staff has been working on that, and that, I guess, is our first debut.
I thought it looked new. It's very nice.
Thank you.
I'm kind of nervous. I only see one engine on the plane. Maybe it's turned
It's just tilted. It's there, I promise you.
Yeah. I'm thinking circles here.
Well, thank you. It was important for me to understand the sole source nature of this as well, and I guess the analogy is that Apple has their software and Microsoft has their software, and these companies all develop their own. So.
Yeah, and it's kind of, I guess, not unique around the port as well, like our HVAC systems, kind of the same thing, that it's their proprietary software to do so.
All right, I have no other questions. Gentlemen? Would you mind?
A motion to authorize the executive director to execute a sole source justification and a contract with Airside Solutions Incorporated of Auburn, Washington for the airfield lighting control and monitoring system in the amount of $56,274.37.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Then, I beg the commissioners' approval. I'm going to go on to the advisory committee before we go on to other business, if that's okay. At this time, I'd like to announce the advisory committee meeting schedule. The Marine Advisory Committee meeting will be held April 10th at 6 p.m. here in the Harbor Center building. The Technical Airport Advisory Committee will be meeting Thursday, May 10th at 9:30 a.m. in the ARF conference room out at the airport on 2005 West Bakerview. And the Bellingham International Airport Advisory Committee will be Thursday, May 10th, 5 p.m. Ooh, 5 p.m. at the ARF Conference Center at the Bellingham International Airport. Those are the advisory committee schedule. I asked the commissioners what they'd like to do now. We can go to the next public comment period and then other business, or we can.
Fine with me. Let's just.
At 5:30, we do have another opportunity for public comment. If there's anyone in the audience that wishes to. Yeah.
You did good. You did good.
Stay on your calendars for Diane. First time we've ever been on time on our agenda.
I have so many things I'd like to say right now, but I'm on camera. So anyone wishing to comment, feel free to do so now. We'll give you 3 minutes. We allocate 15 for this time period. Anyone? Okay, seeing none, we're going to close the public comment period. And if it would beg the commission, can we move on to other business and wrap this up? Mr. Shepherd, do you have other business?
I don't have anything else today.
I have none today.
And I just have one small, would love to have an update on what's going on at the Granary Building and the road and when that road might be opened up, and maybe you can tell me what's going on there and how long are we going to be indisposed?
Brian Gower, Director of Environmental Programs. Yeah, there's a lot of work going on the, and we can provide the commission with a more comprehensive update here, maybe at one of the next commission meetings on where we're at on a number of the kind of the waterfront district projects. But yeah, the city's well underway on the roads. When you drive by, you can see that they've poured the curbs. They're starting to pour sidewalks. They've got the utilities in for this first stretch of road, which is called Phase 1, which goes from the intersection of Roeder Avenue down to about the intersection of Maple. So it's, I don't know the linear footage off the top of my head, but it is a good stretch of this first phase of road that is anticipated to be open sometime in April, May timeframe. There's a few components they have to make sure that for safety, that once they open that up and for that intersection that it's all buttoned up and safe for access. But the major components of the construction of that first phase of the road and sidewalks should be done in the next month or month and a half. Waypoint Park then has also made a great progress. They're almost complete with that. As you see when you drive by there, they've got all the landscaping in, trees are planted, the hydroseed has been installed, the acid ball has been moved over, the beach is created, sidewalks are poured, stairs are poured, benches are in. I mean, the park is really just about ready to be opened. The art piece on the Waypoint art ball or acid ball, that needed to wait for weather dependence before they applied the coating that is on that, so they're waiting for the weather to be right, and they'll do that. And then there's some playground equipment that is on order, and when that arrives, they'll install it. But they won't wait on the opening of the park for that if there's a backlog for those components. So in the next month and a half, the first phase of that access should be open. The city hasn't officially announced when that's going to be, but they are signaling that it's in that time frame.
Did they indicate when the road was going to be?
The full completed road? Yeah, that's on schedule for then at the end, around the end of the year. So that'll be the first phase.
I'm actually thinking about Roeder.
When Roeder's going to be open? Yeah. That's a good question. I'll get back to you on that. I don't know when that full access will be opened.
But it should be before the granary opens, so not after. So sometime in the next month and a half.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So we're within 6 weeks.
Right.
I do have one thing. That's right. At the next meeting, I'd like to have an update on our RF situation, what's going on with what Seattle's saying and so on and so forth, if we'd have time just for a short.
Which situation?
Our firefighter.
Oh, yep.
Next meeting will be fine.
Okay.
Not going to do it right now, next meeting is fine.
And then, gentlemen, I do believe we owe some consideration on the post point. I think when I'm 100 years old, if I'm still fighting a battle the way he's fighting it, can we just discuss that at some?
So we've done this at.
Discuss it now?
We've done this at other commission meetings. We've done presentations to the commission. So I don't know, Sylvia, you didn't prepare anything, but maybe you can give us the kind of 1,000-foot view, overview of this.
We're going to get everything out of you before you go. We're going to squeeze every little.
Don't worry, we know where she's going.
When planning director, and I would like to tell you also, Alan Birdsall and Mike Hogan are both quite expert in this, so there will be no expertise lost when I retire. I'm sure they'd both be happy to step in. The issue is, again, it's the name of the park is what Dr. Burkholt has wanted. He wants the name to have the words Alonzo Poe or Poe's Point Memorial Park in the name. And when we came before the commission last time at his request, I think this, like I said, I don't think it's been 30 years because the port hasn't owned the park since the early 70s, but he's been here a number of times. We thought that he would be happy with having that timeline, giving the history of the park, and but he really wasn't. The history is very nicely done. Actually, I think Mike Hogan and Alan Birdsall may have even worked with him. We got pictures from Jeff Jewell at the museum, and the picture that resembles a cadaver I don't think is really all that bad. It's a nice wooded area.
Was it better than the one Rob we saw?
Yeah. But I think one solution could be to change that picture, but I think the issue really is that it's not real prominent. It's inside of that gazebo. It's not real visible. Unless you go in and sit down there and look at it, you're not going to see the name. You're not going to realize it. And the port really was not responsible whatsoever in naming the area Post Point. It just happened that the treatment plant next to it was named Post Point, and Mr. Burkholt is correct. Post Point is further down the coast, but the name Poe's Point got confused with Post Point. People started calling it that, and at one point our park sign did say Post Point on it. That was removed. We did that last fall. It was like $130 to remove the words Post Point and make Marine Park bigger, and it would be about an equal expense to take Marine Park off and put Post Point Park on if that was the pleasure of the commission, or possibly switch out the sign. Mr. Burkholt continues to call. He calls me at least every couple of weeks to ask how things are coming on this. He calls Mike Hogan now that he knows I'm retiring, and he's probably going to continue to be here for a while longer if you don't address it. Any other questions?
Sylvia, can we just rename it, or do we have to go through the names and places?
No, I think it's a port park. We could just rename the name of the port park, not renaming the point. If we were going to name a geographic name, that does have to go through the Geographic Names Board. But the names of parks are up to the body that owns the park, which in this case is the port. Although there's a little bit of an interesting situation there too. The city condemned a stretch of that park when they put the sewer line through, and we don't even own about half of that park. Is actually owned by the city because they took the sewer line through it. But at this point, we could talk to the city. They don't consider it their park. They consider it their sewer line and our park. So I think we could probably just rename the park. It is now referenced in our park plan. It's referenced on a number of maps. So it's no easy task to just rename a park. We could rename it, but then we're going to have to change it in a number of areas, which are all within our control. But I think that was part of the commission's thinking before, is how much effort is it worth to change the name of a park?
Does the sewer line go through the graveyard?
Sewer line park, is that what you're saying?
Sewer line park. I don't think the sewer line goes through the graveyard. Actually, I think the graveyard was up on the top of the hill that was removed. It was all flattened by during the fisheries, and I think that graveyard isn't even there anymore.
think Pan American Fisheries leveled that
Yeah,
area. when we
yeah.
built
It was
there.
leveled before we bought it, back in the 60s, and the port acquired it in the 70s.
And he doesn't seem to be satisfied with any compromise at this point. My question is, if we did something like made the gazebo area and
Right.
prominently made it the Poe's Memorial picnic area.
Gazebo or picnic
yeah.
area.
Does
Yeah,
that,
the
does that,
picture he showed me just had 2 benches with some kind of a plaque in the middle looking out at the thing. But
You
I
look at
think
me, but
that
you're
he
not
wants
100 years
people to
old.
be able to drive down the road and see the name Poe's Point.
And didn't we do some research, and something in the back of my head is telling me that Pose wasn't necessarily the most outstanding citizen?
I don't have any knowledge of that. I don't recall that. I think we discussed what if he was in the Confederate Army or something. You know, we don't know. We'd have to maybe do a background check on him.
So I'd like to throw 2 cents in here, seeing as how I was born and raised on the south side. And I can remember back to about 6 years old, the things in the harbor and stuff I've done. And I have never in my lifetime heard that called Poe's Point until I became a commissioner. And this was brought up here. So I'm sympathetic to what he thinks, but I'm not entirely sure that it's that important to the citizens of Fairhaven, because I was born and raised there, 4 generations over there. So to change from Marine Park when we're charged with the economic growth of this county doesn't make any sense to me, because we're advertising that as a marine area for people and tourists to come and spend money here and go to. When you put Poe's Park in the book, people aren't going to, that's not a marine park where their children can go down and play on the beach and be in the salt water and so on and so forth. So to me, I think if we can put the history there, like when you go to many other places in this country, we have signs, people stand there at those reader signs, read about the history of the spot where you're standing and look out onto the water or look onto whatever. To me, that acknowledges and gives respect to that property and the people that were originally there. But to change from Marine Park to me now seems to be a waste of money, and because it's been named that for so long, and it's not disrespecting to Alonzo Pohl. He might think it's a great name, but we can't ask him. So I don't find justification in my mind to change the name of the park. I find justification in my mind to make sure that the people that come there understand what the ground was before it was Marine Park, and that's respectful to Mr. Poe. And I think that does what this gentleman wants, but maybe not to the extreme he wants, but that's what I'm willing to do.
It also seems that he had quite a bit of distaste for the misnomer on the map where it said "you are here" and it was incorrectly labeling Poe's Point and Post Point. It didn't seem like that little "you are here" was accurate.
And that might be one solution, would be to upgrade that photograph with a more illustrative photograph, as
Yeah.
opposed to renaming the
I think
park.
that could go to one of his major criticisms.
That might
seemed particularly
help.
offensive.
And I'm sure Mike Hogan would enjoy doing that.
I don't know, we still got a week. I am gonna say.
You're brutal today.
I am going to say that I am 100% in agreement with you on this. We don't have enough background. We don't know enough to say that we should change it. I think it's too much trouble. I think we probably spend as much time on this as we probably should. In all deference to Mr. Burkholz, he's a passionate man, and I do appreciate his passion for it, but I think that's a heavy burden for us to lift at this point, and
It sounds like there's some simple things, though.
that we can do.
Thank you.
Upgrade the
It sounds like there's some simple things we can look into as a staff and report back to you with some changes that may make them happy. So we'll get on that.
Yeah, when you say we, do you mean
Staff, port staff,
like
like Alan and
Sylvia?
Alan and Mike.
I think if we could correct some of the things he spoke to with what's there, and maybe add a couple of stand-up reader signs with a smaller version of the history of it in different spots, I think that's I would be willing to do that, but further than that, no.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all I have for other business. Gentlemen, meeting adjourned.
Ooh.